Hey, everybody. Welcome to this session of Epic. This is the Keeper track, and you are watching Next Level Geckos. My name is Bobby, and I am from Gecko Cove. I will be your host today. With me, we have the one and only Paul Morlock with Rack House and Dakotah Blue Exotics. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me today.
Thank you.
Happy to be here.
Awesome. So today, what we want to talk about are the next level geckos. What does next level geckos really mean? Basically, you know, most people when they're looking at geckos, they're starting with typically a crested gecko or a leopard gecko, two phenomenal pets. However, there are some other options out there, and the three of us sort of specialize in those other options, don't we?
Certainly do.
So let's just go around. I want you to introduce yourself and tell me a little bit about the animals that you keep before we kind of dive into talking about the animals individually. So
take it away, Paul.
Yep, go right ahead.
Yeah, me. Paul Morlock, owner of Rack House. Been breeding geckos for much longer than I care to remember. Especially all the new Caledonian stuff. I mean, I've worked with many different species, but primarily now the new Caledonian stuff. Gargoyles are my specialty. Chahoua, leachianus. Those are my three mainstays.
Awesome.
My name's Dakotah. I run Dakotah Blue Exotics. We've been breeding since 2016, 2019 as a business. We do quite a few different gecko species, but I specialize in tokay gecko mutations.
Awesome. And those are absolutely gorgeous, some of those tokays. Maybe another session we'll have to have on the genetics of it. But today I want to talk about the animal's care, right? If someone's looking at getting a gargoyle gecko, a tokay gecko, a leachianus gecko, I kind of want to let's break it down into different avenues. First, I want to talk about what size enclosures and what does their general setup entail. So let's start with Dakotah. If you could talk about tokay geckos. If someone's looking to get a tokay, what are they in for? Are they looking at a 4x4x4, or are they looking at what kind of enclosure would you recommend?
Yes, sir. I recommend nothing less than a 6 foot by 4 foot by 10 foot. Pretty much you have to add an addition for your gecko. That's the only way to make them tame,
Yeah.
So for tokay geckos, for the longest time, the standard minimum size has been the 18 by 18 by 24, much like the most New Caledonian geckos. Well, besides leechies. However, unlike, just under leechies, tokay geckos are the world's second largest gecko you can own in captivity. So personally over here, we keep them in a little bit larger when we're running pairs. We do about 2 foot by 2 foot by 2 foot cubes. I've seen quite a lot of people do the 18 by 36 or even the 2 by 4 as well.
Awesome. And inside their enclosures, what are you putting in there to make sure that they feel comfortable? Is it littered with different levels and hiding spots, or can you keep them a little bit more open? How do you pack that enclosure?
I usually have one section of the area just really cluttered. They seem to really love cork, and what they really seem to love doing is wedging themselves in the smallest crevice they can. I used to use PVC pipe as like a cheap alternative because I'm running so many pairs. However, it's really hard to get them out, especially when you get mom, dad, you get a couple siblings going on. And I ended up taking out all the PVC pipe except for one pair because that female exclusively lays her eggs in there. And there's never been a time where there's not new eggs before all the other eggs hatch out. So we still got that PVC pipe, and man, there's I'd probably say 4 siblings and then the mom and dad, and they all cram themselves in that little pipe. So they definitely like being in tight little locations. So I make sure to have a part where you have both vertical, horizontal with your cork bark or branches, and then plenty of cork tubes as well. So they have plenty of places to hide and feel secure.
That's awesome. And Paul, with the gargoyles and leechies, is it a similar kind of setup? What kind of enclosure size and setup would you recommend for them?
I'm a little off the normal when it comes to that question.
Okay.
With the new cow animals, there's a lot of evidence that these animals in the wild, their range is quite small. So I advocate for a smaller cage, depending on the age of the animal, and obviously not leechies quite so much here. When leechies are small, definitely smaller cages. Same thing with gargoyles. I have a few theories as to why it is, but anything under 2 years of age, small. What I like to say is smaller is better. The one thing that I kind of get kickback from people is when you're keeping an animal, you want to give it as much space. The thing that I advocate for is these are arboreal animals. So space is not the dimensions of the enclosure, but it is the volume of surface area inside the enclosure. So with all the new cows, I recommend the smallest enclosure, but literally, I mean, you pack that cage full from top to bottom, front to back, left to right. It's only too full if you can't close the door.
Fair enough. Which I've gotten to the point in some of my enclosures, because they like hiding in those tight spaces. I think most
Absolutely.
geckos are at some point prey to something else, right?
Sure.
And so, especially as they're growing, they need that security so that they feel comfortable to explore, find their food, and eat, grow. It's definitely a key factor I've seen in almost all of my geckos that I've kept, but especially the new cows, because it's an island full of geckos eating geckos,
Yes,
right?
sir.
And there's plenty of things that are eating tokays too. So, this is why they have a little bit more of a defense mechanism, but we'll get to that in a second. So we've talked about the enclosure, the furniture. We want to definitely pack those in. What about heating and lighting? This might have some differences between new cal and tokays. So, Dakotah, what do you do? Do you keep them at room temperature like our new cals?
No, I mean, I don't keep my new cows at room temperature either. They're all set in the same building, man. I mean,
Okay.
We're new here. I'm only about a month, so I only caught the end of summer to see how it is. But we were hitting about, 89, 90. And as long as you mist them with the new cow, they're not going to have any problem. Just pound them with food and keep them hydrated. And I've never had any issues with them. For the tokays, depending on the heat, if we are hitting those 90s, I'll usually turn off the basking and just leave the UVB going for them. So they're still getting somewhat of a basking zone, but you're not hitting with an ambient room of 90 and then a basking spot that would be, 100 plus degrees. But I do like to keep some sort of basking if we do, like in winter, get down to those room temperatures where they're able to go to an area that's going to be somewhere around the 80 to, at most for me, 90 degrees.
Love it. And you mentioned that.
What's the room temperature anyway?
72 to 75.
Well, it depends if I set it or my wife sets the temperature.
Right. And that's kind of where I was going, right? Because room temperature depends. Room temperature here in Florida, I guarantee you, is much different than room temperature in Minnesota.
Absolutely.
Yes, sir.
It depends on the time of year.
Right.
So obviously, Paul, you agree. What do you keep your geckos at temperature-wise? What do you try to focus on?
My goal is the mid to upper 70s. Okay. But what my building actually is really determined by whatever the temperature is outside. I run about 10, maybe 15 degrees cooler than whatever it is outside. So the temperature and light cycle differences outside naturally here affect my building.
Okay. And so what I'm hearing is that they can take the heat. Is there something that, Dakotah, you mentioned, as long as they're fed and they have water? I know humidity is the next thing I want to bring up.
Humidity.
Both of these animals come from very humid environments. So how do you guys manage humidity, and what kind of ranges do you shoot for?
Go ahead. You got it first.
All right. When it comes to humidity, I try to keep the building at a set 50%. That kind of just helps me keep controlling the individual enclosures. And then at this point in time, I'm running so many different cages. I don't really take a strong look at what the humidity is inside each cage. It's more of that you open the enclosure, open the glass door, open the bin, and if it feels more humid in there, then you're on the right track. But I aim, depending on where you're at, for this building in particular, I usually shoot for at least 2 times, once in the morning and once at night, to have that dry out period and then those humidity spikes.
Awesome. Paul, is it similar for you, or do you have any key differences?
No, mine is a little bit different. My goal is 75%, and I try to keep it as consistent as possible. I don't do dry out periods. I don't do dry out periods because I've noticed over the years when my humidity drops below 60% for any length of time, I can physically see a difference in the animals. And in New Caledonia, my biggest argument against the dry out period is not so much a dry out. When we first started keeping the animals, the dry out period was because we were using spray bottles to spray them. And with the New Caledonia stuff in particular, you want high humidity, but you do not want wet surfaces. And if you are spraying, you are wetting the surface, and that evaporation is what gets you humidity. So I'm a big advocate for humidifiers or foggers over a misting system. I don't want the surfaces of my enclosures to be wet. But I do strive for 75% and try to make it as consistent as possible. My building, for the most part, probably fluctuates between 75 and like almost 90. 85% is probably what I average.
Okay.
Do you ever have any problems with mold? I had a similar building in Massachusetts where I was hitting that pretty consecutive high 70s to almost 90s. And man, the mold, especially in the food, it would be 24 hours and the food would already mold over.
With the food, do I run into some mold issues? I'm not going to say no, but it's not within 24 hours. I mean, I can leave the food in there for 2 or 3 days before it gets moldy. I think the key to maintaining that sort of humidity, especially within an enclosure or inside of a building, and not having issues like the biggest kickback I get is mold and respiratory infection. I've never experienced either one of those to any degree to make me stop. I think the key to that is air circulation.
Yeah.
If you have high humidity and you don't have air circulation, you're asking for trouble in other areas. In my building, I run 2 ceiling fans, and then there's 3 floor fans throughout the building that blow up. So I mean, you go inside the building and there is air movement no matter where you are, for sure.
Absolutely. And this is something where I've taken a lot of great information from both of you over the years. And one of the things that I'm trying right now is actually a gecko grow tent, where I am
100%.
taking an enclosed environment, because I'm in the Midwest and it is dry. If I'm running my AC 24/7 or my heat, it dries out my house. And so it doesn't matter if I put a humidifier in the room, it's gone like that. Right. So misting was what I was doing. And yeah, you needed that dry out period. Otherwise I was having issues after spraying everything down. But I find it actually so much easier now that I've moved everything into an enclosed vent, or into a closed tent. And I'm lucky enough to have that space available. But I have a humidifier, I have a heater in there, and I'm able to dial everything in. And I've seen appetites go up, growth rate go up. They're softer animals. I find that very interesting. No shedding issues with babies or adults. So far, so good. But I think these are island geckos for the most part. And yeah, you definitely need that airflow. And the nice thing is I've got fans I probably have too many fans in that environment because, right. So it's like a little typhoon part of the day. But it really gets things moving. There's no stale air when I'm doing my cleanings or just going to check on them, because we're all gecko nerds. I keep the door open and do a full exchange, that kind of stuff. So these are all things that I find very helpful. So we talked about lighting, UVB. Now, Dakotah, you mentioned that you put UVB on your geckos. Do you put them on all of your geckos or just the tokays? And is that a necessity, or is that something that is optional with them?
It is optional. You don't necessarily need the UVB for speaking with tokays specifically. The people that do, people that don't. I've noticed, especially when it comes to my babies, with the tokay geckos, when you're growing them out, they do grow a lot quicker with the UVB. Their appetites are better, and they're just grow a lot faster than babies I've seen that I don't use UVB. I don't use UVB for a lot of my animals. New Caledonian, I'm usually not running it. I do for the leachies and chewies, just because, the chewies specifically, just because they have a much more calcified egg, and I want to make sure they're able to synthesize that D3 and all the vitamins that they need. But for stuff like my crested or gargoyles, I've never personally done the UVB.
I think that's most people with new cows is they're not using UVB unless, like you said, it's chewies. Would you agree, Paul?
Yeah, I would agree with most people. Yeah, I mean, yeah, not using UVB. Even with Chahoua, I don't have anything against it per se, but I don't think it's necessary with the new cows. I mean, I've raised enough gecko. There's many other species that just simply will not breed and do well without UV. It is 100% necessary. With the new cow animals, I mean, generation after generation after generation, It's clearly it's not necessary.
Do you think that's because of diet?
100%.
And so, a lot of geckos that maybe have a small requirement for UVB, you can get away with not having the UVB because there's D3 in the gecko diet, or you're dusting your feeder animals. So let's talk a little bit about diet. What do you guys feed your animals? How important are bugs with the certain species you keep? And are there any other things that you guys feed your animals except for bugs or diet?
Let me return on your UV question real quick, because that actually ties into this next question. For the new cow stuff, there has been evidence that where these animals are living, under the canopy, they're not getting tremendous exposure to UVA and UVB. On the other hand, there's been a couple of studies that showed a high mineral content in the soil, in the plants, and in the insects, which means that's being transferred over to the animals. I think this study that I had seen would explain why we can raise the new Caledonian animals without UVB, because probably in the wild they're getting those nutrients from the stuff they're eating more so than the light.
Okay. Interesting. I've never heard that. That's awesome.
Yeah, that was cool to see.
Yeah, that's awesome. See, I'm learning something too. And so, okay, if that's the case though, and the bugs and the soil and everything that they're consuming has more nutrients, and so if for anybody kind of new to geckos here, let's talk about what diet is, right? When we first got these animals, crested geckos, gargoyle geckos, new cow species, there's a powdered diet that people make made of typically fruit, vitamins and minerals, and then sometimes insects. When you mix that up with water, it's one of the best things in the hobby, to get people into the hobby. Do you guys feed for your new cows that exclusively, or what else do you supplement that with your regimen?
No, I find insects are the real way for a new Caledonian. You gotta pump them with bugs. I think it's old, outdated info saying that they just need the crested gecko food. When I finally did make the switch to offering crickets once to twice a week, and now to more where we're doing about 3 times a week, I found the babies just explode in size. I mean, animals that were growing out for a year, you start pounding that thing with insects as well as the crested gecko diet, you'll get the same size in about 2 months. It's incredible. As far as the feeders, we do a lot of crickets and then roaches every now and then.
Awesome. What about you, Paul?
Yeah, I mean, the diets are awesome. Without the diets, honestly, we probably wouldn't be able to keep the new cow stuff in captivity. I have a unique perspective on the diets because, I was working with Alan when Repashy first diets were being formulated. Mm-hmm. So I kind of have an idea of where it came from. They weren't meant to be, it wasn't designed as a food in order to keep these as pets. It was actually designed because when these animals were first being studied, the truth is they're opportunistic, and they're eating a little bit of everything. So much so that diet is almost impossible to reproduce in captivity. So the problem was, well, how do we get nutrition into them? So they built up a diet that had all the nutrition, and then the second problem was, how do we get them to eat it? Adding fruit was getting them to eat it. Now, I agree with Dakotah 100%. Protein is key. The diets are awesome, but they are not everything. Almost all the new Caledonian geckos are eating other geckos or insects to a huge degree, which is protein. Yeah, so more protein, they're going to grow faster. None of them are fruitivorous. None of them are fruit eating. None of the new Caledonian geckos.
Especially the geckos we're talking about today, right? Sure. If we're taking that next level into, the gargoyles and the tokays and the leachy, look at their teeth.
Yes.
Feel their teeth ever, right? They've got some sharp teeth, right? They are eating other bugs, geckos, animals, anything that they can get their teeth around that can fit in their mouth. Typically, they're very opportunistic, and that makes them fantastic, pets to have because they're very willing. But some of them are a little pickier than others. That's for sure. I know that. But the diets they're phenomenal. They really do allow so many more people to come into this hobby, and they really fill in any kind of user error with the gap in nutrition, which I love. So the fantastic thing to have in the hobby. Is there anything else about diet that we're missing? Especially Dakotah with the tokays. Obviously, they don't eat the crested gecko diet, correct?
I don't know, sir.
No. So what are they eating, and what's your regiment with them? How much do they set you back with your cricket budget?
My God, man. Yeah, I mean, you can sell these tokay gecko morphs for, 3, 4, 5,000. You're not making your money back on these crickets. Jesus. Yeah, tokay geckos are insectivores. I've seen people, they've tried like the crested gecko food. I mean, some of them might lap it up, they might not. And then I've seen people try to feed things like pinkies and stuff like that. I stick with crickets. It's a lean source of your proteins, your fats. When starting out, your tokay's usually only going to go after the crickets, anything that's high moving. Roaches seem to really kind of stop in one place, and they don't get that little natural instinct to go hunting. So I find crickets to be my personal bread and butter when it comes to a staple. And then for most of my geckos, I've also gotten them accustomed to superworms when it comes to my breeders. Obviously, laying eggs, things like that, it's going to take a lot out of the female, and I love getting those extra fats into her. And man, once you get them to finally eat superworms, it's a little hard getting tokays to dish feed, but once you get them going, they explode. I mean, my geckos are now like double in size from what they used to be ever since I introduced superworms about once a week.
Awesome. Now, I don't know if this is true or not. I've just heard that they taste like bacon, and maybe that's why they like it so much. Have you ever tried one? So anyway, message me if you ever go and actually try it and tell me if it actually tastes like bacon. I don't know, but I heard that bacon. What's that?
I can see nutty.
They're nutty, not bacon.
Probably depends on what they're eating. You're gut loading them, right?
True.
So that's also just as important, but that's another conversation. Let's talk about one of the favorite things people like to do with larger geckos, right? There's so many gecko species and anole species that people could be keeping, sort of like fish, where they're gorgeous and they're interactive and they're out during the day. These are not necessarily those animals. These are the larger geckos that are hiding during the day, that come out at night. So why do people keep them? Other than they are gorgeous, but a lot of us can handle them. So let's talk about, are these geckos actually handleable? If they're a little bit more challenging, how do we get them to be handleable? Because I think a lot of people want to keep these pets because they are interactive. So let's start with the least handleable, but can be awesome if you know what you're doing. The tokays.
I don't know what you mean, man. My leachies handle the same way as my tokays.
And that's what I want to know. Yeah.
I don't have a large pool of the leachies to really tell, but yeah, when it comes to tokays, I mean, it's not going to be your average new cal, your crested gargoyle experience where the worst you're going to get is them jumping away. They can be a little bit challenging. I don't think they're necessarily impossible. You see a lot of people when you do show a picture on social media or a video of you holding a tokay and it's not open biting you, you get people saying, that's impossible. How did you do it? Truth be told, the little famous tokay of mine, Bert, that is my friendly ambassador little dude, that took me like 2 weeks of just dedication and taking a couple bites here and there. It's really just making them see that you're not a threat. Mm-hmm. And then once that switch is gone, I mean, I've gone, 6 months of not handling Bert, and I can just, when it's time for a show, I can go on, grab him, and don't really have much. But yeah, you just gotta, for tokays, you're gonna take a couple bites. I honestly believe that the first thing you should do is get bit, because I promise you, I mean, unless you got a real large one, the fear of the bite's gonna be a lot worse than the actual bite. They don't really hurt that bad.
That's fair. And one thing I don't want to gloss over, you compared them to the leechies, right? So talk a little bit about that. Like, do you find leechies just as challenging or just as easy, depending on how you're looking at it, to kind of hand tame down? Is there a major difference?
I do think there is a difference. I believe, and again, I don't have a very large pool. I only have I've got just a pair and then 5 or 6 grow out leechies. So I'm a little new to the leechy stuff going. This is only my second or third year with them. But from my, tight lens personally, I found that leechies are going to be territorially defensive, where tokays are defensive with everything. So once I get my leechies out of the enclosure, they'll do a little squeak, but they ain't huffing and puffing like when they're in the enclosure and I'm trying to get it out. But my tokays, until you get them to know that you're not a threat, it don't care where they're at. They're still going to be, the big bad tough gecko.
I love it. Paul, are you having the same experience? Let's start with the leechies, because you keep leechies as well. Do you find once you get them out that they're a lot easier to handle, and how do you go about managing that for if you're a keeper?
I don't typically reach into the cage and grab the animal. I take the cork bark that they're on out of the cage and then grab the animal. I've never been bitten. And I like what Dakotah said. I like how you kept saying you did not once use the word aggressive.
No, sir. Don't believe in it.
Dude, every time I hear leechies and tokays are aggressive, my head hurts. They are not. They are defensive. And if you understand that and you tailor your approach to that, and you teach them you can be trusted, they're just like every animal is the same. I don't care what it is. If you teach them you can be trusted, they will learn. The difference is some animals it takes a little more work. A gargoyle is easy to earn trust. A tokay is going to take a little bit more work. That's it.
Yeah. And I find that these animals don't get enough credit for their intelligence.
Oh my God, right? No way.
They are defensive animals because in the wild they're predated upon quite heavily, right? And so they need to be, defensive and again territorial, especially if they're kind of packed in and they're fighting for resources. But that's what they're programmed to do. But they are intelligent animals that can learn these patterns and learn their keepers as well. And so given enough time, given enough, proper experiences, they can really, kind of like you said, tame down, some easier than others. And, I think, but on the flip side too, if you give them a really bad experience too, they'll also remember that. Certainly. I think that, so that can make things challenging as well.
They don't forget things. Imagine, I use the analogy all the time. Imagine this baby gecko pops out of an egg and it's sitting on a branch and a bird swoops down to get it and it misses, right? I mean, think about it for a second. The gecko has to remember that a bird is a threat for the rest of its life, and that goes for any bird. And with the show, Bobby, you've seen my animals at the shows that I have on the table. The shows put those animals in a unique position, with all the people and everything that's going on. I can tell you for certainty that those animals completely understand that situation.
And it blew me away, to be honest with you. And I've seen, some other animals out since then. And so it shows that it's repeatable. But I mean, I remember seeing you had 5, 6 animals just chilling on your cage, and they weren't trying to scamper away.
They weren't scared.
People, they weren't. Yeah, they were completely habituated to that sort of environment and very comfortable. And it's credit to you and how you set them up for success there. So that was fantastic. Could you ever do that with a tokay, Dakotah?
Yeah, I take Bourque to my shows as well as a little ambassador animal, because 90% of the time when I've got tokay babies on the table, you're going to hear them say, "Oh, tokays, I remember in 1985, that thing bit the shit out of me. You can't touch those; they're vicious." And I say, "No, look, have them in the little show bin display, whatever you want to call it." And I take them on now and say, "Look, and touch them on the chin, he ain't gonna do nothing to you." And it kind of just, at least it ain't a lot of people, but there'll be at least, 10, 20 people that are like, "Oh, you know what? I didn't know they could be tamed down and be calm."
Well, and I'll say that I'm a little biased here. Everybody knows I'm a gargoyle guy, right? And I love my reds and I love the way gargoyles look. I think they're one of the most gorgeous animals. But tokays, honestly, just the base morph is a lot of people's dreams. They are the best representation of an animal that looks like a Pokemon and speaks like a Pokemon, just says their name, and a lot of people would love to have them if they could get over that initial fear and the misunderstanding that they are aggressive. They're not aggressive. They're defensive, and they just need that patience to learn. I love that. Let's shift gears real quick into breeding. All right. Now, a lot of people who are looking to get into these animals, there are people out there that keep one as a pet, and that's completely fine. Those are fantastic people. Maybe you keep 5 as pets. Great. Not everybody has to breed. But if you do want to breed, let's talk real quick about what does it take to breed. Let's start with tokay geckos. What does it take to breed tokay geckos? What are some tips and tricks to be successful?
Tokay gecko is going to be a little bit different than the average gecko, just because the fact is they do bond with each other. They obviously have that parental instincts. And so it's not so much on, there's definitely some species where you have to, longer time, longer daylight hours, more misting, less misting, more heat, less heat. But I have found that these geckos will breed. I've got buddies in Colorado, actually, where they start their breeding season in the fall, whereas mine start their breeding season in the spring. So I think it really depends. The biggest thing I've found for what you can do artificially is I bump up the mistings. I mean, I miss the shit out of those enclosures to the point where I actually sometimes need to get a fan inside each individual one because the water is just so soggy from how often I'm misting. But it's that mimicking that rainy season, at least for me, that really gets them knowing that it's time to start breeding and going. But I mean, it really just the biggest thing is just getting those geckos to like each other, and there's not really much you can do for that. I've had pairs where I'll get eggs in that first month to 6 weeks. I've had pairs where 7 months I get my first set of eggs, and then I've had one where I've paired them for 18 months and they just never wanted to do anything with each other. So
now with tokays, if you put them in and they don't love each other, right, and they don't pair bond, are they going to be territorial where they rip each other up? Or are they just going to be kind of like cats that don't like each other and just kind of hang out and, they'll occupy the same space, but they're not going to really interact together very much?
Yeah, I found the majority of the time the latter is going to be the most case. The big thing that you try to see is if the geckos start sharing the same hide, that's a pretty good indication that you'll start getting some eggs. But the majority of the time, they are just going to avoid each other. They'll be on separate sides of the enclosure. I've never personally seen my geckos attack each other, but I have heard stories from other breeders where, there's a specific female or a specific male that they just don't want anyone in with themselves in the enclosure.
Okay. Well, that's a big plus for them, honestly. Shifting gears into new cal species, when you're talking about especially the largest gecko in the world, the leachy, some people have like a rain dance they go through to put them together. Some people just throw them in and, but Paul, let's talk about how do you pair let's start with the larger species, the ones that do pair bond a little bit more, the leachies, and maybe a little bit about Chahoua.
I just throw them together.
Do you? All right. You don't do a rain dance?
Nope.
Do you put them in, with the leachy specifically, do you put them in a different enclosure or male to females, female to males?
What, you mean for breeding?
Yeah, for breeding.
I put them both into, on a first introduction, I put both of them into a new enclosure. So there's no territory. No one's trying to protect anything. They're both new to the area, and they sort it out on their own.
Okay.
I think with the new cal stuff, and I came about the way that I do it now. I came about it specifically because of Chahoua. My personal experience, I don't think that leachianus or Chahoua pair bond, at least not in the term of the way that I see it. When I think of pair bonding, I think of like what tokays would do, or birds, parrots, for that matter, right? I mean, they find
I don't mean to interrupt.
They find a mate and they stay with that one forever. I'm not saying that Chahoua and leachianus don't do that in the wild, but I don't think that's a prerequisite for Chahoua anyway. I've taken one male and cycled him through several females, and it worked. I've also done groups with Chahoua, multiple females with a male, and I don't recommend either one of those procedures. But I did experiment with them and they worked, which kind of tells me that they're not pair bonding. What I think, I always put the analogy, it's like people. I think what happens, New Caledonia animals are a little unique because they're on an island. The temperatures are pretty solid all year round. The males are always wanting to breed, always, period. With the exception of 3 months out of, in the wintertime. But other than that, they're always wanting to breed. So the females are the ones controlling the sex. It's up to them whether it happens. I think compatibility is determined when they first meet. If they meet and they have an argument, just like people, you're in a bar trying to pick someone up and, you guys have an argument, it ain't going to work, right? I mean, it's just not. I think the leachianus are the same thing, and the Chahoua. I think it's all determined by their first meeting. If the male is gung-ho on breeding and the female isn't having it, your likelihood of success goes down. It's that simple, I think.
And so knowing that, do you limit the number of times you introduce a male? Is there a certain time of the year that you introduce your pairs or your groups?
Yeah, certain time of the year. Now through December. Actually, now through the end of November is, in my opinion, is the best time of year. The way that I see it, you put two animals together, they're always there's going to be a dominant and a submissive, okay? And then we're talking about leachianus in particular, or even the gargoyles to some degree, not quite as much, but we can say territory. I don't think gargoyles per se don't protect their territory, but do they have their own space? Yes, they do. Yeah. So if you put two animals
find
together,
them always in the same place.
If you put two animals together, and the female's not receptive, let's just say, and the male is trying to get it, then when you put them together, the way that I see it, they're arguing about three things. So they're arguing about territory, they're arguing about hierarchy, and they're arguing about sex. All right. And so that leaves a lot of room for things to go wrong. If you put them together in the off season when the male is least motivated to breed, then what I think is happening is they come together, they sort out the territory, they sort out the hierarchy, and then hopefully the idea is then when the pheromones start flowing and the breeding season is upon us, they're not worried about those other two pressures, and it's only sexual pressure. And then at that point, the female is inviting the male, and so they're less likely to argue at that point.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, because they definitely are way more relaxed and chill during the off season for sure. I've seen that in my geckos. Now with breeding, age, weight, what do you guys wait for to make sure if you've gone to an expo, you picked up a baby, how long until you can actually, if you got a male and a female, put them together?
Maturity, whatever it is for that animal.
What does maturity mean to you, Paul?
When they're an adult.
Okay. So if I get a gargoyle baby, if they're 60 grams at a year old.
Weight doesn't determine adulthood.
Okay. So what does then?
Age.
Okay. So are we waiting year, 2 years, 3 years?
Well, for the new cow stuff,
yeah.
A male is suitable after 2 years. But a female, in my opinion, is not suitable. Minimum 3 years.
Okay. And a lot of people would say they're ready at 2 years, but I know you say 3 years, right?
I use an analogy again, right? My daughter had her period at 11 years old. She's capable of reproduction. Does that mean she should have children?
That's fair.
And Dakotah, what about you and the tokays?
When it comes to the tokays, I'm the same, 3 years. I find when it comes to tokays, they're going to be laying so many eggs. And once they kind of start doing the egg laying, they don't really put on that much more size after that because of all the energy and calories, everything that goes into laying eggs. So for my captive bred females, I like to wait till they're about 3 years. And then when it comes to my wild caught or imported stuff, I'm waiting at least 18 months into captivity. And then I'm only running them until I see the first clutch of eggs. Then I remove for the girls. The males, I'll do quarantine for the male for the imported stuff just to make sure there's no parasites, no viruses, anything like that. And then I'll pair, but for the males, I usually wait about, again, that 18 2-year mark. That's usually when they get that nice adult size. If they're too small, they're not going to be compatible and they can risk getting hurt. And that is just going to go up even further when you don't have animals of similar sizes. And I find they just don't really want to breed until they're that big gecko.
Mm-hmm.
But for new cal, I agree again with the 3 years. I've tried running girls at 2, and they just drop so much weight to the point where I can't run them consecutively the following season. I need to hold them back and get them that weight. So you might as well just wait. You're going to have a healthier, stronger New Caledonian gecko at 3 years versus you being impatient running it. You're only going to get maybe 50% of the eggs that you could get if you waited that year. And then you're going to have an animal that looks scrawny and you're going to need to get going again for the following year after that.
Yeah, I would even argue that you might be limiting what you get over the lifetime of the animal.
Yes, sir.
You know, if using the same analogy, all right. So at 2 years for a female, when she ovulates and lays eggs, to me, that's when the reproductive system is first coming online. It doesn't mean that it's fully developed. You know, back in the day when I used to breed at 2 years, the first year was hit and miss. You know, you might get good eggs, you might not. You might get one egg clutches, you might not. But like what Dakotah said, the biggest problem with that is it's energy in and energy out. When the females are being bred and they're producing eggs at that size, all of the energy goes to egg production. Almost none of that energy goes into growing the animal. And so if the animal's not completely mature, you're stunting the maturity, which, you know, I could go on for the repercussions of that down the road.
Yeah, I'd like to second that, or touch a little bit more of what you said with them laying infertile eggs. I like having the females have a cycle of infertility eggs before doing that pairing. So usually, I mean, because I'll have geckos where I don't think they're big enough, so I don't run them, and they start laying me duds. So they are able, but you're able to get them used to that process. You're still able to grow the animal out a little bit more, and you're going to have a better season versus an animal that's never laid eggs before. And then you're thrown in, you're going to run into exactly what you were talking about.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's a challenge for a lot of people just in this hobby. Nothing has taught me patience more than picking up these reptiles into my life. I mean, maybe having kids, but like it's because you get a baby, you want to grow it out, you're ready to go, and you know, even after that, then you got to wait for them to pair, and then after you know that they paired, you got to wait for them to lay eggs, and then you got to wait another however long to let the eggs hatch, and then you got a baby, and now you got to let it grow out all over again. So it's just a cycle of patience, and you have to enjoy the entire process and the entire journey and take it for what it is. And so it's really, if we can do it in the most healthy way that gives the animal the most longevity and makes the babies the strongest, that's going to be your best bet overall. So I love everything you guys are saying. Let me ask you guys real quick. So perceptions of animals that you keep. If you had to give me one thing that the general public, things you hear about your animal, right? About your animals, that's just wrong, and you want to set the record straight right here and now, what is it going to be? So, Paul, what's something about the new cow species that you hear all the time that it's just wrong?
I have a feeling we're both going to have the same answer.
You might.
Aggressive. I cringe every time I hear gargoyle and aggressive in the same sentence.
Mm-hmm.
They're not. They're, if anything, they're defensive, which again, for, somebody who's trying to teach an animal to trust you, being able to tell the difference between aggression and defensiveness is critical.
And I don't even find, especially with gargoyles, that they initially bite right away, right?
No, they
Unless
don't.
you're squeezing them,
Yeah.
right? And that's the only time I've ever seen them where they actually try to bite, is if you are physically hurting them.
I don't think I've ever been bit by my gargoyles.
No, they're not
Yeah.
biters. Unless if you
No,
get bit by them,
I get
you
peed
probably
on by
deserve
plenty
it.
of them, but no bites.
and
That's
that
normal.
proves it. That proves it, that they are trying to escape
Right.
because they're trying to make themselves lighter and easier to actually run away. And so, every animal, if they want to get going, they do that.
And
And
nobody likes
so,
truth.
no, but the trick is there, because they are smart animals, that if you put them back right after they go to the bathroom on you, you will have that happen over and over and over again.
Yes.
Wipe your hand off on a towel, keep them out, handle them for even longer, get them used to you. Know that that is not a way for them to get put away.
Yes.
Because they will remember that. And I think that goes for all the species we're talking about here. So yeah, they're not aggressive. Dakotah, what about you?
I mean, yeah, it's going to be the same. People
Right?
see them as, I mean, that's the big stereotype is, demon gecko, junkyard gecko, whatever people call it. But yeah, they're not. I think tokay geckos have a higher intelligence than your average gecko. I think you got to be a little smarter to realize that, hey, this giant thing, like if you were a dumb guy, I'm talking about cresteds, then yeah, if this giant was going towards you, you got to be pretty dumb not to try to get out of the way or do something to deter that until you realize it's not a threat. Mm-hmm. But I think they're an absolutely fantastic species. I remember I had held the same stereotypes and preservations about tokay geckos until I finally owned one, and then I realized how magnificent they are, and I went from 1 to 6 in about a month.
I think a lot of people are starting to get into them. There's a lot of new morphs coming out. You're a big part of that. So if you guys have not gone and seen Dakotah's channel, we'll get to those little shout outs in a second here, but they're just gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. All right. Last question for both of you. All right. If someone new is looking at getting one of these animals, right? They've clicked on this video, they're interested. Let's just start with gargs and then we'll go to tokays. What would you say is your elevator pitch? Why are they the best gecko for someone to jump into today?
Confidence. You're not going to find, in my opinion, in the gecko world, you are not going to find a better gecko that is more stable and more confident than a gargoyle.
Yeah. I agree. I think that they are a nice balance between that, defensiveness and confidence where once you get them, used to you, which doesn't take very long.
No, it doesn't.
They'll just sit on your hand. They'll hang out. Sometimes I'll put them on my shoulder, they are great.
No real predators helps a lot.
Yeah, that's true too. Dakotah, sell me. Why should I get a tokay?
Tokays. I mean, I think you already brushed up on it. It's like a living Pokemon. It says its own name. I think the vocalization is so cool. I think it's if you're not a little bit about a frog guy, like I'm not too much into frogs, tokays are going to be your best bet because you're going to have that vocal noises. If you're looking to keep a pair, you're going to be able to see the parental instincts that the animals have, which is always just a stunning thing to watch when it comes to reptiles. It's very rare, few and far between species that do it, and it's a cool treat to be able to see that inside your own enclosure at your house.
Yeah, I love that. I wish we had more time to really even dive deeper into the parental instinct that they have. And, even you said, how many tokays did you find in one tube, right? I think that is just such a cool sight and a cool thing that you definitely don't get with the new cow species. I'm not leaving 2 gargoyle babies anywhere near their parents. So let alone leaving them with each other. You'll be without a baby really quickly. Guys, thank you so much for your time. I hope you had as much fun as I did. I want to go around the table here and, tell us where people can find you and interact with you if they want to, find out more information about your animals or just the information you have out there. Let's start with Dakotah. Where can people find you?
You can find me at Dakotah Blue Exotics on Instagram, Facebook. YouTube's my main thing. We've been doing YouTube now for 6 or 7 years. I got about, I think, 1,000 videos on that channel by now. And then you can find me on TikTok, but I constantly forget about that app. So I'm kind of on and off with it.
Very fair. And you got to check out Dakotah's YouTube channel. I've been watching it for years, and he's got an awesome approach of getting you the information you need. And he has some sensational stuff too, which is a lot of fun to watch. I love it.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. Paul, where can people find Rack House?
Facebook, Morph Market, and Instagram. Instagram would be under my name. Everything else would be under Rag House.
Excellent. And definitely, you know, I know you don't have your own YouTube channel, but you've been on a lot of podcasts too. And a segue into my podcast on YouTube. Go check out my channel, Gecko Cove. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook. But I think, Paul, you're the number one replayed episode on my podcast. Oh, by a mile. So,
Awesome.
a lot of people really have loved it. And, you know, you definitely, both of you guys were fantastic guests. So, and even today, I'm so glad that I get to interview both of you for a second time. Thank you again to Epic for having us on and allowing us to chat about the animals that we love. And we'll see you in the next Epic.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Later, guys.
Have a good one.